Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to review transformations. And our objective for this video is that I can identify and perform transformations. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So transformations are a really big topic that comes into play in classes as far back as possibly middle school math, but definitely in Algebra 1, again in geometry, Algebra 2, and pre-calculus. So we're going to just briefly summarize what you hopefully already learned in those classes to freshen up on those skills. So I learned a mnemonic called high-vo, and that helps me remember where things are happening with a function in terms of transformation. So the high part, hi, the horizontal stuff happens inside the function, and it is the inverse of what you think it should be. So when you see plus, that actually means left. When you see minus, that actually means right. So horizontal happens on the inside, and it's the inverse of what you think it should be. If we're looking at stretches or shrinks, again, it will be inside the function, and there will be a stretch if we're talking about a number greater than 1, or a shrink if we're talking about a number less than 1. But again, what we see inside is the opposite or the inverse of what we think it should be. So let's pretend that a is 2. That would actually be a horizontal shrink of 1/2, because nothing is as we think it should be with horizontal transformations. We also tie a reflection in the y-axis when we're thinking about horizontal things, because that negative sign is going to be inside the function. If we're listing out a transformation, like we're explaining in words what's happening, we always start with horizontal translations, and then we deal with horizontal or y-axis reflections, horizontal stretches and shrinks. That order doesn't matter, but the translation must come before these two items. And then we'll talk about vertical stretches, shrinks, or reflection in the x-axis, followed by the last thing we'll list is a vertical translation if it exists. So the vo part of high-vo is talking about our vertical items. The vertical things happen on the outside, and they're the original, they're the OG. Everything is what we think it should be. Plus means up, minus means down, 2 in front means times 2 or a stretch of 2, 1/2 in front means a shrink of 1/2. So everything is as you think it should be. A reflection in the x-axis affects the outside of the function since we're changing y. So we're taking the opposite of the entire function. So now that we did that brief recap, let's look at some examples where we're identifying or creating a transformation so that we can really hone these skills in. Okay, so here we're going to describe the transformations in words. Again, we're going to focus on that order because order matters. So for number 1 here, there's nothing happening inside, I should use green. There's nothing happening inside the function, so we don't need to describe anything horizontally because the only thing inside those parentheses is our x. So the first thing that we're going to describe is what's happening with this negative sign when we're talking about our vertical transformations. Reflections, stretches, and shrinks comes first. So that's going to be a reflection across the x-axis. And this +2 is going to be a translation up 2. And I like to list these in bullet points. All right, let's look at a couple more examples. All right, so here you have numbers 2 and 3. I'm going to encourage you to pause the video and try both of them on your own. Number 2 is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot going on. Number 3, be very careful about the order in which you list those transformations. Then unpause the video and see how you did. All right, hopefully you had enough time to look through those. If not, pause it and don't look at the screen. But here we have a translation to right because this -2 is inside the parentheses and the opposite of what we think. So -2 actually means right. Here it has to be listed in this exact order. 1 to the left, vertical stretch by a scale factor of 2, and then translating down 1. Okay, I'm going to put one last example up for you to try on your own. All right, here's our last problem where we're going to be describing the transformation in words. Order matters. Pause the video and then unpause the video when you're done. And there we have it. Translate 3 to the right. Then after you list that horizontal translation, reflect across the y-axis because that negative sign is inside the function, followed by a translation 1 up. Now that we've practiced describing the transformation, let's actually practice doing the transformation or transforming a function. Okay, so for problems 5 and 6 here, we're not actually given a specific function. We're just told that we're performing a transformation on the function f. So our answer is going to have f of something or negative f of something. If we were given actually a function like f of x equals 2x plus 5, then we would be doing those transformations to that function. But in this case, our answers are going to be in terms of f. So let's get started. We're going to translate 4 to the left. That's horizontal, which means it's happening inside. So inside, 4 left means that everywhere that there was an x in the function, we're going to be substituting in x plus 4. Down 2 means on the outside, we're going to have minus 2. So our new function, we would substitute in x plus 4 everywhere that there was an x, and then we would subtract 2 from any constants. Go ahead and pause the video and try and do this for number 6 on your own, and then unpause the video and see how you did. Okay, hopefully you had time to do that. So reflection over the y-axis means that I'm going to change the sign on x, so f of negative x, and then there's important words here. It says and then, so after we have done that, we're going to translate 1 to the right. Well, this is out of order. We're supposed to list them, translations and then reflections, when we're talking about what's happening horizontally. What that means is we're going to actually add an extra set of parentheses because this translation is going to be affected by the reflection across the y-axis. So inside, we're going to have x minus 1. And then we're going to go up 2. Let's clean this up a little bit just so it's easier to see. And there we have it. Now let's tie this idea of transformations to graphs. So let's suppose we were given the graph of a function and we're being asked to sketch a transformation. When we're doing this, if we look at this particular example, we can see that we're going to reflect across the x-axis and we're going to translate up 3. So let's jot down some tips that will help us through this process no matter what the function is. The first thing that I do when I'm sketching a transformation is I really focus on an individual point, 1 point at a time. In this case, I'm going to take 1 point, I'm going to reflect it across the x-axis, and then I'm going to move it up 3. But focusing on 1 point at a time is really going to help you sketch your new graph. Don't forget about order. Order matters. Don't forget about high-low. Do your horizontal things first before you do your vertical things. And lastly, make sure that your new graph actually makes sense visually. Does it look like you reflected it across the x-axis and then moved it up 3? Sometimes by taking that extra step to think through, we might catch a mistake that we made along the way. So let's start with the point 2, 4. If we reflected it across the x-axis, it would be at 2, negative 4. Then if we moved it up 3, this negative 4 would be a negative 1. So this point 2, 4 is really going to end up at 2, negative 1. Similarly, for the point 0, 2, if I reflected it across the x-axis, it would be at 0, negative 2. And then after that, because order matters, I'm moving it up 3, which would put it at the point 0, 1. Go ahead and pause the video, make sure you've jotted down those notes, and then try and do this last point on your own. Then unpause the video and see how you did. Hopefully you've had time to do that. Now we have our 3 points, and we want to make sure that the shape looks similar to the best of our ability. So go ahead and connect those points with a smooth curve. And then check that that does visually make sense. Okay, let's move on. Okay, this is a tricky example that you can skip over if you're really trying to focus on just the basics right now, but I encourage you to pause the video if you're up for a challenge and try and describe the transformations taking you from f of x to g of x, and then unpause the video to see how you did. So the first thing that I noticed is that this graph definitely has a reflection. It looks in both directions. However, I have to describe transformations in order. So I need to talk about translations first. So if it's going to reflect across the x-axis, it first needs to translate, or if it's going to reflect across the y-axis, it first needs to translate so that when it reflects across the y-axis, because I want this purple point to eventually become this one, focusing on just these x values, I need to get it to 1 so that when it reflects, it becomes negative 1. So let's list those two transformations first. So after doing the two horizontal translations, this original point is now going to be here. Now we can work through our vertical things. So to get this point down here, we're going to reflect across the x-axis. And then it doesn't look like anything else needs to happen. Everything should match up after that point. And you could go ahead and pick another point, such as this one, and perform those 3 transformations in that order to make sure that this is correct. All right, here's our last 2 examples. I'm going to encourage you to pause the video, list the transformations, and then perform them, and use different colors so that you can really see which one is which. So here's that transformation for number 7. Again, notice I identified those key points and I moved each of them based on the transformation. And here's the graph for number 8. So pause the video, check over those, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Okay, so to recap what we covered in this video was on transformations. Our objective was that I can identify and perform transformations, and hopefully you're feeling pretty solid about that. Go ahead and write down any questions you have, and I look forward to supporting you on this. Thanks for listening.